The first thing Marin noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind that settles in a sunny park, but the kind that presses down on your chest and makes you feel like you don't belong anywhere. It was strange, because the cafe was full, midday sunlight spilled across polished tables, spoons clinked against ceramic cups, and laughter floated lazily through the air. And yet, in the middle of all that warmth, one small girl sat alone at the corner table, her feet barely touching the ground, her fingers wrapped around a cup that had long gone cold, her eyes searching every face that passed her by. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Journal, because sometimes the smallest moments change lives forever. Marin had not planned to stop that day. Her life had been running on a tight schedule ever since everything fell apart 6 months earlier. After losing her job and ending a relationship that had quietly drained her spirit, she had become someone who avoided eye contact, who moved quickly, who chose solitude because it hurt less than disappointment. The cafe was supposed to be a quick break, just a place to sit, breathe, and gather strength before facing another uncertain afternoon. But something about the little girl pulled her in, a quiet gravity that refused to be ignored. The girl wasn't crying. That's what made it harder to look away. There were no dramatic signs of distress, no raised voice, no trembling hands. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that suggested she had learned not to expect anyone to come. Her dark curls framed a face too thoughtful for someone so young, and her small backpack sat neatly by her chair, as though she had been waiting there for a very long time. Marin hesitated. She had spent months convincing herself that other people's problems were not hers to carry anymore. She told herself that stepping in would only complicate things, that maybe someone was watching from nearby, that it wasn't her place. But then the girl looked up, not directly at her, but through her, and in that fleeting moment, Marin saw something painfully familiar. Loneliness. The kind that didn't ask for attention, because it had already learned to expect silence in return. Without fully deciding to, Marin walked over and sat down across from her. The girl blinked in mild surprise, her fingers tightening slightly around the cup. Marin offered a gentle smile, the kind she hadn't practiced in a long time, and asked if she could sit there. The girl nodded slowly, her expression cautious but not afraid. There was a quiet politeness about her, something almost fragile. As the minutes passed, Marin learned small pieces about her. The girl's name was Soline. She liked drawing trees and collecting smooth stones from the park. She spoke softly, choosing her words carefully, as though she didn't want to waste them. But there was something she didn't say, something that hung in the spaces between her sentences. Marin noticed that Soline kept glancing toward the door every few seconds. Not anxiously, but expectantly. As though someone was supposed to walk in at any moment and hadn't yet. Marin asked gently if she was waiting for someone, and Soline nodded. Her father, she explained, had told her to wait there after school. He had an important errand, something that couldn't be delayed. There was no complaint in her voice. Just trust. Time passed slowly. The sunlight shifted across the floor, stretching into longer shapes. People came and went. Cups were cleared, tables wiped, chairs rearranged. But no one came for Soline. Marin's chest tightened. She knew what it felt like to wait for someone who didn't show up, not out of neglect, but because life had pulled them in too many directions at once. She also knew how quickly hope could turn into quiet disappointment. She ordered a fresh drink for the girl and a sandwich, pretending it was nothing more than a casual gesture. Soline accepted it with a shy nod, her gratitude more visible in her eyes than in her words. There was something about the way she ate, slowly, carefully, that made Marin realize this might not be a rare situation. Hours passed before the cafe began to thin out. The afternoon crowd faded into a gentle lull, and still, Soline waited. Marin considered calling someone, perhaps the cafe staff or even the authorities, but something stopped her. Not fear, but intuition. Soline didn't seem abandoned. She seemed certain. Certain that her father would come. And then, just as doubt began to creep in, the door burst open. A man stepped in, breathless, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his hair tousled as though he had been running. His eyes scanned the room with urgency until they landed on Solene. Relief flooded his face so quickly it was almost painful to witness. Marin watched as he crossed the room in long strides, dropping to his knees beside the girl. His hands hovered near her shoulders, not gripping, just reassuring, as though he needed to confirm she was real, safe, still there. There was no anger in him, only exhaustion and something deeper, fear. Solene's expression softened immediately, her quiet patience melting into warmth. She reached for him in a way that made it clear this was not a rare bond, but a strong one. A familiar one. Marin expected apologies, explanations, perhaps even a defensive tone. But what she saw instead was a man trying his best to hold everything together. He had been delayed, she later learned, not by carelessness, but by responsibility. A single father balancing too many roles, trying to keep a fragile world from falling apart. He worked multiple jobs, juggled schedules that didn't align, and made choices that often forced him to trust that things would somehow work out. That day, they hadn't. Marin felt something shift inside her. For months, she had seen the world through the lens of her own loss, her own disappointment. But sitting there, watching a father who clearly loved his daughter beyond measure yet struggled to meet every demand placed on him, she realized that not all absence came from indifference. Sometimes, it came from trying too hard in a world that didn't make space for mistakes. The man thanked her, not with grand gestures, but with sincerity that carried weight. It was the kind of gratitude that came from someone who didn't often have the luxury of asking for help. And Solene, before leaving, looked back at Marin with a small, quiet smile that lingered longer than expected. That single moment stayed with her. In the days that followed, Marin found herself returning to the café, not out of habit, but out of hope. Hope that she might see them again. Hope that maybe, just maybe, connection wasn't as distant as she had convinced herself it was. Weeks later, she did. This time, Solene wasn't alone. Her father sat beside her, looking less rushed, more present. When he noticed Marin, his expression lit up with recognition, and something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding of that day, of what it had meant. Slowly, over time, their lives began to overlap. Not in dramatic ways, but in small, meaningful ones. Shared tables. Familiar greetings. Occasional conversations that grew longer with each passing day. Marin began to feel something she hadn't felt in months, purpose. And Solene, who once sat alone in a crowded café, now laughed more freely, her eyes brighter, her silence no longer heavy. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that kindness still exists in the world. Because sometimes, all it takes is a simple question, one small act of courage, to change the direction of someone's life. And before we reach the end, here's a special request. Comment below with a moment when someone's kindness changed your life, or when you chose to be kind even when it was difficult. Marin never expected that sitting down at a stranger's table would lead her back to herself. But it did. In helping someone else feel less alone, she found a way to heal her own quiet wounds. And in a world that often rushes past the unnoticed, that simple act, just asking if she could sit, became the beginning of something far greater than she ever imagined.